She didn't shout. She didn't plead. She didn't text paragraphs he wouldn't read. Instead, she vanished. But not like smoke. More like sand. She withdrew the way a tide recedes before a storm. Slow, invisible, intentional. Not because she didn't care, but because her nervous system couldn't afford the ache anymore. Somewhere deep inside her psyche, something ancient whispered, protect the core. Freud would have called it a withdrawal of cathexis, a pulling back of emotional energy from an object no longer safe. What looks like silence is actually a reallocation. The libido, once spent decoding his half-hearted replies, now reoriented toward survival, toward repair, toward the construction of internal shelter. This is what most men never understand. Her silence isn't empty. It's sacred. The desert doesn't ask to be loved. It simply exists. Vast, unreachable, and yet unbearably magnetic. She's not punishing him. She's preserving herself. Because when a woman goes silent, the unconscious knows she's building something. Not a wall. A womb. She is not fading. She is fermenting. She's not waiting for him to notice. She's remembering how to notice herself. The long-neglected soil of her own inner world now drinks in the quiet like water. No more adjusting her tone to be received. No more rationing needs to seem low maintenance. No more measuring her enoughness by the barometer of his attention. When she walks into the desert, she walks into herself. Here there is no noise. Just breath, wind, memory. Each grain of silence is a micro-resistance to the idea that she must plead to be chosen. The desert is not a punishment. It is a right. And only the brave make out softer. Freud once said, one day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful. This desert, her silence, is one of those years. Beautiful in the way only survival can be. She used to wait for the typing bubble, the green dot, the unsent reply. Her worth danced on the rhythm of his inconsistency, and she called that longing. But longing, Freud said, is often just disguised repetition. The repetition of childhood grief, of unmet needs chasing the same ghost in different lovers. She wasn't begging for his presence. She was reliving her original wound. Now she sees it. She no longer needs his chaos to feel alive. Because in silence, a deeper voice has emerged, one she used to drown in trying to be palatable. The woman who goes silent is often mistaken for cold, but her warmth is being redirected inward. She is not suppressing her feelings, she is reclaiming their audience. Each time he doesn't respond, her soul responds instead. It says, stop shrinking. It says, you were never too much. He was simply unready. It says, you are allowed to outgrow those who only water your insecurities. The silence she inhabits is not passive. It's revelatory. Like sunlight on cracked ground, it exposes what she tolerated, what she normalized, what she believed she had to earn. This silence is not the absence of love. It's the presence of boundary. Freud wrote, we are never so defenseless against suffering as when we love. And in loving him, she handed him every defense. But in silence, she gathers them back. One by one. She doesn't beg anymore because she finally believes her emotions deserve echo, not dismissal. And in that absence, in the echo chamber of ghosted text threads and quiet goodbyes, she hears it. I exist beyond this. The woman who goes silent is not disappearing. She's detaching. From delusion. From projection. From the belief that love should feel like confusion. The silence is her return to truth. There is a strange illusion in many men that the one who walks away holds the power. Freud called it the narcissism of minor differences, the subtle superiority one tries to maintain by keeping emotional distance. He disappears, believing that withholding makes him desired. But he forgets, what is denied becomes dissected. And what is dissected loses magic. At first, she did analyze him. His silences, his retreats, the coldness that dressed itself as mystery. But analysis is a short-lived seduction. Eventually, it turns sterile. The woman who goes silent does so because she sees through the performance. She no longer confuses avoidance with depth. His silence isn't depth, it's defense. A barricade of the ego, mistaking emotional inaccessibility for masculinity. Freud wrote that repression is the cornerstone of the unconscious. And now she sees, his silence was never wisdom. It was wound. A wound disguised as detachment. A fear of exposure, masked as stoic indifference. In a culture that teaches men to equate stillness with strength, many forget this. True strength is not the absence of emotion, but the capacity to express it without collapse. So she walks away, Not because she has no more to say, but because saying it would be speaking into a void. She leaves the table not because she's lost, but because she finally sees the game. The emotional breadcrumbing, the avoidance dressed in poetic scarcity, the romanticization of withdrawal. The mirage has lifted. What once shimmered like power now reveals itself as panic. Emotional withdrawal isn't mastery. It's fear of being seen, and she refuses to love a mask. Her silence is not just detachment, it's refusal. Refusal to perform the one-woman show of emotional labor. Refusal to translate, decode, and interpret what a man refuses to say. In her silence, she's not asking to be pursued. She's declining the chase entirely. Not because she's bitter, but because she knows real power whispers. She no longer hopes he will change. She no longer clings to potential. The desert taught her something else. A man who fears the depth of his own heart cannot hold the depth of hers. And real men don't run from intimacy, they rise to it. In silence, something unexpected grows, not emptiness, but sound. Her own voice begins to surface. Not the voice shaped by his preferences. Not the voice trained to soothe, impress, or pacify. But the buried one. The original one. Freud believed that symptoms are the return of the repressed. And what returns to her now is not pathology, but power. Unspoken truths rise through her chest like steam. They don't need to be said aloud, they only need to be heard by her. This is the paradox. In withdrawing from him, she reconnects with herself. She begins to remember what it felt like to be in a room and not scan for approval. To speak without rehearsing softness. To exist without performance. Her voice, once diluted by desire, becomes potent again. She doesn't just speak, she resonates. There is a moment in every woman's healing where she stops rehearsing conversations in her head. Not because she has nothing to say, but because she knows he was never listening. And when there's no one left to convince, a kind of peace blooms. She is no longer the echo of his silence. She is the sound of her return. Her silence gave her back her voice. He was never just him. That's what she sees now. Freud defined transference as the redirection of feelings from one person onto another, usually unknowingly. And that's exactly what happened. Her silence didn't begin with him. It began decades earlier, in rooms where her voice was too loud for someone, where her needs were too big, where love had conditions. So when he withheld, it felt familiar. When he pulled away, something in her childhood memory stirred, a sense of chasing safety, of earning warmth, of becoming smaller to stay connected. And this is the part few talk about, how often women confuse attraction with recognition. She didn't fall for him. She fell for the pattern he carried. He mirrored her unhealed spaces, and that reflection once felt like love. But now, in silence, the spell breaks. The projection dissolves. He is no longer a father figure, nor a ghost of her past. He is simply a man. And she is simply a woman no longer willing to abandon herself for connection. Freud wrote, "We are what we are because we have been what we have been." And for the first time, she stops running from what she has been. She meets it, not with shame, but with understanding. This chapter isn't about him at all. It's about what he activated, and what she's now ready to unlearn. Because the wound that once begged to be seen is now being seen by her. She no longer confuses trauma bonding for intimacy. She no longer calls emotional starvation passion. Her silence is no longer waiting. It's watching as she walks herself home. Once, she believed he was the answer. To the ache. To the emptiness. To the long-held belief that love must be earned with endurance. But slowly, silence begins to strip away the illusion, not out of cruelty but clarity. Freud said, illusions commend themselves to us because they save us pain and allow us to enjoy pleasure instead. And he had been her illusion, not because he pretended to be more, but because she needed him to be. The projection wasn't his deception, it was her defense. A way to protect hope, to animate meaning where meaning lacked foundation. She now sees how much she assigned him. Depth he didn't earn. Emotional availability he didn't embody. Safety he didn't offer. He was never the shelter. He was the storm disguised as a doorway. Silence has a way of pulling back the curtain. And with each quiet hour, she withdraws the projection. Not to blame, but to see. To separate fantasy from form. To give herself back the pieces she gave away. Because projection is just disowned emotion, cast onto another in hopes they will carry what we were taught to hide. She no longer needs a man to mirror her worth. She sees it in the way she doesn't reach anymore. In the way she breathes deeper alone. In the way she no longer waits for someone to validate her vulnerability. This withdrawal is not a loss, is a return to the real. The ego never shouts louder than when it's afraid of dying. In the silence, she watches her old identity unravel, the one built to be chosen, to be wanted, to be enough in someone else's eyes. Freud believed the ego was not the master in its own house, that it served three harsh masters, the ID, the superego, and reality. And here, in her silence, all three collide. The ID wants love. The superego wants perfection. Reality offers neither from him. So the ego begins to soften, not as failure but as freedom. She no longer performs emotional availability to win proximity, no longer filters her truth through the lens of acceptability. The need to be good, sweet, or agreeable burns away under the desert sun. She can feel the collapse, not a breakdown but a shedding. The ego collapses when it no longer needs to be approved of. And in that space, the real self breathes again. For so long, she thought love would finally quiet the ache. But it's the quiet that revealed love, the self-love that doesn't hinge on external affirmation. There's a kind of power in no longer needing to be impressive, in no longer needing to explain why she left, in no longer needing to be understood by the very man who never tried. The silence became a scalpel, and now the ego that once clung to him like air has begun to fall away. And beneath it, something ancient stirs, not pain but peace. She is not less without him. She is more without the performance. Freud believed that libido was more than sexual energy, it was the fuel of the soul. The psychic energy that flows toward whatever we desire, whatever we invest ourselves in. And for too long, her libido was tied up in the ache of almost love. The mental rehearsal of what he might feel, the anticipation of words he might never say. But now, something has shifted. That energy, once scattered across unread messages and sleepless nights, is coming back home. She feels it in her body first, in the absence of panic, in the return of appetite, in the hunger to create, to walk, to move, to dance. Libido is movement, and movement is aliveness. She is no longer frozen in wait. What he once drained is now her reservoir. She doesn't fantasize about him anymore. She fantasizes about mornings she doesn't dread, about laughter that comes without calculation, about skin that doesn't flinch from being known. This is what reclamation looks like, quiet, steady, embodied. She doesn't need closure from him. Her libido has closed the loop for her. And in that energy, raw, unfiltered, unassigned, she finds the first whispers of new life. Not because of a new man, but because she remembered, her energy was never meant to orbit someone who could not hold it. She is the sun now. For years, she believed he was complicated, layered, deep, the type of man who loved silently, the one who would come around eventually. But Freud warned us, we are prone to illusions that echo our unconscious wish. And her wish was to be the exception, to be the one he changed for, to be chosen after all the waiting. Now, in the stillness of her own healing, the myth falls apart. He wasn't unavailable. He was avoidant, emotionally evasive by choice, not destiny. She sees now, emotional unavailability is not mystery. It's immaturity dressed in silence. The fantasy was hers. The facts were always visible. Freud spoke of a reality principle, the painful but necessary shift from wish fulfillment to truth. And this is her shift. She no longer finds poetry in his silence. She finds self-betrayal in her overanalysis. Because true intimacy doesn't require translation. It doesn't need decoding. It feels safe, simple, seen. And the man who couldn't give her that, he wasn't deep. He was distracted. Emotionally unavailable men aren't rare. They're just loud with silence. The real rarity is the woman who stops romanticizing the ache and starts listening to her nervous system instead. That woman is her now. There's a difference between silence and speechlessness. Speechlessness is shock, the body frozen in the trauma of being unseen. Silence is choice, the soul maturing beyond the need to perform. She is not silent because she has nothing left to say. She is silent because the words she would have used on him are now being spoken to herself. Freud taught that our neuroses speak when we cannot. But she no longer needs symptom as signal. Her clarity is calm. Her power quiet. She isn't angry. She's anchored. She doesn't explode. She extracts. She watches the man who once confused her with his silence now grow unsettled in hers. Because the kind of silence that used to be pain has become precision. A scalpel that cuts through illusion. He can feel it now. She's not waiting behind the silence. She's walking through it. There is no more pleading. No more inner dialogue rehearsed for his attention. The stage is empty. The lights are off. The only voice that matters now is the one echoing within. She doesn't speak to be heard. She speaks, when necessary, to affirm what she already knows. This is the silence of a healed. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of truth. She returns, but not in the way he imagines. Not with softness shaped for his comfort. Not with the open wound of, I miss you. She returns to herself. Freud said that all human actions are motivated by the pleasure principle, the instinct to seek joy and avoid pain. And for a long time, her joy was entangled with his presence. But now, she has reoriented pleasure inward. There's no announcement, no grand arrival, just quiet presence. A woman drinking her coffee slower, sleeping deeper, saying less meaning more. She's no longer trying to be the girl he regrets losing. She's becoming the woman who never needed his recognition to exist. This is the true return, not to the relationship, but to her essence. The one untouched by his absence. The one that existed before she gave it all away. He might reach out, one day, when the silence becomes too loud. When the ghost of her starts to speak louder than the real ones who stayed. But she won't go back. Not because she's punishing him. Because there's nothing left there. No identity to recover. No narrative to fulfill. The story ended. And the author, finally, is her. There is a moment the body registers truth before the mind accepts it. Freud believed the unconscious never lies. It records every sensation, every rupture, every repetition, even when consciousness refuses to let go. That's what she now understands. Her silence wasn't just a decision. It was the unconscious finally overriding the fantasy. She didn't choose to walk away all at once. She simply stopped reaching. One day she looked at her phone and felt nothing. No pull, no ache, no narrative needing to be rewritten. Because somewhere deeper, beneath thought, beneath hope, the unconscious had already buried it. This is the quietest kind of ending. The one without ceremony. No slammed doors. No final words. Just a nervous system no longer flinching in his name. She remembers how she used to ache for closure. Now she knows, closure is not something he gives. It's what happens when the fantasy dies. She no longer tries to figure him out. That need was never about him. It was about soothing the little girl inside who believed love had to be earned through understanding. Freud said, we are what we are because we have been what we have been. And she has been loyal to confusion long enough. Now she's loyal to peace. The silence is no longer waiting for his return. Is mourning the self she lost while waiting. And resurrecting the woman who no longer negotiates with uncertainty. This is the death the unconscious has known for some time. And now, finally, she lets it reach the surface. No more postmortems. No more resuscitations. What is dead, and what lives now is hers. Rebirth is never loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or applause. It comes like a tide, soft, consistent, undeniable. And for her, it began the moment she stopped narrating her pain and started living beyond it. Freud wrote, out of your vulnerabilities will come your strength. And this she understands now. The strength was never in the silence itself. It was in who she became within it. She is not the same woman who waited. She is not even the same woman who walked away. She is the one who rose quietly from the debris of her own illusions. This is not a return to hope. It is a return to self-authority. The kind that no longer romanticizes withdrawal. The kind that no longer clings to potential. The kind that no longer sees silence as suspense, but as sovereignty. She is clear now. And clarity is a sacred violence. It shatters the narratives we built around absence, the meanings we projected onto men who gave us none. She no longer mourns what didn't become. She marvels at what did, herself. Reborn not as a version he might miss, but as the version she finally recognizes. She never screamed. She never chased. She never collapsed in desperation. She simply disappeared, not in absence, but in presence. In power. In peace. Freud said the mind protects us from unbearable truths, but once we're ready, those truths rise. And the truth is this: she was never weak for loving him. She was only untrained in loving herself more. Now, her presence lingers where her words once did. He may not remember what she said, but he will remember how her silence made him feel. Because nothing haunts a man like the woman who loved him fully and walked away quietly. Not to manipulate, not to punish, but because she was done negotiating her worth. There will be moments, late, unprovoked, alone, when he feels it. Not regret, but reckoning. He'll wonder what she's doing, who she became, and why she no longer needs to explain anything. And she will be far from the desert. Not rescued, not replaced, but reborn. Her silence was never about him. It was about her return to the self he never truly met. And in that quiet reclamation, she became unforgettable. Not the echo, the origin. If this story moved you, or helped you see your own silence in a new light, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. Your voice, even in silence, matters here. And somewhere, another woman might find her strength because you shared yours. Thank you for being part of this space.